What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, back to review Christopher Nolan's latest sci-fi thriller extravaganza, Tenet, which I saw earlier today, way up in Danbury, Connecticut, because in New York State right now, no movie theaters are open, but it sounds as if movie theaters might be opening soon in New Jersey, so maybe I won't have to travel quite so far to see these giant blockbusters in the coming weeks. In any event, I'm going to keep this review initially totally spoiler free and just kind of go into spoiler light territory toward the end, because I know that right now a lot of people just straight up cannot see the movie, or if they can see it, they won't because they don't want to go to the theater. My theater, I think, was about a quarter full, and they did a pretty good job of spreading people out, but I recognize that for a lot of people, that's just a deal breaker. But another reason I'm avoiding turning this video into a complete and total plot breakdown is that I honestly need a second viewing to fully digest the plot and appreciate what the hell is happening. So if you're looking for the full 100% deep dive into every little nook and cranny and secret, this is not it, because frankly, I need people to recommend that video so that so they can help me come to terms with some of the movie, because this is one of Christopher Nolan's most ambitious films. And I know every time he makes a movie, we tend to say that. When he made The Dark Knight, oh, it's his most ambitious movie. When he made Interstellar, it's his most ambitious movie. But it's true. When he made Dunkirk, it was his most ambitious movie. But what's cool about this one is that it feels like the end of like this unofficial trilogy that takes place inside like the Nolan universe that he's created, where you have thrillers that deal with the interaction with and the perception of time. And for me, that trilogy includes Memento, Inception, and Tenet. And it's interesting how he made them all 10 years apart from each other. And it seems like when he's writing on his own, this is the world that always gets those pistons firing in his imagination. But interesting side note, before I get too deep into my review, they played the teaser for the Dune trailer before the movie. It was basically like a minute-and-a-half teaser telling us that on September 9th, the Dune trailer is coming our way. And Dune is easily my most anticipated movie of the year. So that was a huge thrill. If you look over my shoulder, you'll see Dune proudly displayed on my shelf. But if you're a sci-fi fan, clear your schedule on September 9th to watch the full-length trailer. And if you haven't ever read Dune, definitely do so between now and December. You will thank yourself. But let's get back to Tenet, which is a movie that I think people are going to be debating, dissecting, and discussing for a very long time. And I think how people wrestle with it will depend largely upon whether or not they enjoy Nolan's aesthetic, his style, the atmosphere that he likes to convey. Because if you love his stuff, and I absolutely do, I posted this giant video earlier this summer ranking all my top 10 favorite Christopher Nolan films, and I'll include a link in the video notes below. But if you love his stuff, you know he's in good hands, and that even if you're lost or confused or hazy about what's happening, you know he's either going to find a way to reward your patience with some major reveal, or there'll be some major aha moment, or you're just going to have such an extraordinary experience that you're going to want to watch it a second time and really sink your teeth into the more challenging aspects of his films. So I'll say up front, I think this is the most difficult film to follow that Christopher Nolan has made so far. It proceeds at such a rapid pace, and there's so much exposition and so many ideas, and there's so much intricate detail to the plot that I was oftentimes just dizzy trying to keep track of everything. And I think before people watch this movie, they need to almost kind of train their minds to think in a non-linear fashion. And there are plenty of movies out there that are told out of sequence, and that's not what I'm talking about. But if you've seen the trailers for this movie, and once again, I won't go into spoilers yet, but this movie is all about this concept inversion. And what the concept entails is items or people or vehicles that are basically have reverse entropy. They're traveling backwards in time as opposed to forward in time. So if you're traveling forward in time, something that's been inverted, you'll see something like holes in a car, and suddenly the bullet will come flying out of it and land in a gun. Like, that's inversion. Or as you've seen in the trailer, there's a car that's going through this elaborate wreck, but as it turns out, it's wrecking in reverse, and suddenly it's driving in reverse. And things that are inverted have their own unique laws of physics that oftentimes are a mirror image to things that are not inverted. But what makes your mind just explode over and over again, and just what makes your imagination just do somersaults while you're watching this movie, is trying to keep track of all the characters and items that are inverted versus those that are not. And sometimes that switches, and sometimes you'll have fight scenes where there are multiple things happening in a scene, and you have to try and remember which ones are moving forward through time and which ones are moving backwards through time. And I was having to make such an effort to just keep track of all the details. I'm not 100% sure whether or not the movie is completely consistent with its own rules that it establishes. I feel like when you're dealing with science fiction and fantasy, whatever rules you want to cook up, fire away, go nuts. But then the movie has to kind of follow its own internal logic. But because I'm a 20-year fan of Christopher Nolan, even when I was confused, I just rolled with it, assuming that my confusion was probably a shortcoming on my end. And after I've seen it a second time, and I absolutely plan to do so, I think I'll have a better idea of just how consistent he is with these new laws that he's created for this fictional setting. And what makes the juice worth the squeeze, in my opinion, why it's worth so much effort trying to follow this movie, because something like Inception does a much better job of just kind of washing over you and entertaining you and kind of carrying you along. Tenet, you really have to kind of sit up, drink your coffee, and like, all right, what the fuck is going on here? But what holds it all together is this awe-inspiring cast that Christopher Nolan assembled for the movie. John David Washington was already well on his way to becoming a big, badass leading man. But as the protagonist in this movie, he absolutely kills it. He's an incredibly physical actor, and if you watch the behind-the-scenes video for the making of, you see how when it came to the stunt work, he just hurled himself into it, because the choreography is very complex, because if you're fighting somebody who's going through the process of inversion, they're fighting backwards and you're not, and it makes the choreography incredibly unusual but very thrilling to watch. But John David Washington is absolutely the star of this movie. He is more than up to the task of carrying the weight of the movie. But luckily, he doesn't have to carry the weight of the movie alone, because he's got this extraordinary supporting cast with him. And case in point is Batman himself, Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson just absolutely hit a home run with this. And the friendship that emerges between Pattinson's character and John David Washington's character, that for me is the real heart of the film. I think it's a very fair complaint sometimes to say that Christopher Nolan's films can be a little cold and unemotional. They're always very intellectual, and they're always very thrilling, and they're always very invigorating and exciting, but they don't really make you walk out of the theater and go, oh my God, like, don't you just feel good? That's not really what Christopher Nolan does. However, the friendship between Pattinson and Washington definitely gives us one of those moments which really caught me off guard. But Elizabeth Debicki, she's just outstanding. She has this almost like regal, sophisticated air about her, and just the way she moves and the way she speaks, it's just fascinating to watch. And she plays an absolutely essential part in the ongoing action. Aaron Taylor Johnson doesn't have quite as much to work with, but he's just big and giant and strong. And it's funny how Aaron Taylor Johnson started out this little beanpole and kick-ass, but now he's just this giant dude. Maybe my only complaint about the cast in this, and this hurts my feelings to say it because I really love the actor, but Kenneth Branagh, who was so good in Dunkirk. I think his performance in Dunkirk was one of his best performances of his career. But here, he's playing a Russian, and sometimes his accent is so thick that you basically need subtitles to understand what he's saying. And I do want to watch this movie on Blu-ray with subtitles, because there are some key sequences where Kenneth Branagh is discussing the plot, in particular, what happens in the future, like what calamity occurs where you have all this detritus from the future traveling back in time, because throughout the movie, they're constantly discovering little items or bullets or compasses or just little things that are irradiated with a particular type of energy that have enabled it to travel backwards in time from the future. And so during these crucial sequences where we're learning all about essentially the backdrop of the story, I was like, wait, what? Like, come again? So that was kind of irritating. Obviously, Kenneth Branagh is a powerhouse actor. He's a pretty good director as well. But I do need to watch this movie with subtitles before I know the complete, total kind of continuity and setting and all the background info that nerds like myself like to really sink their teeth into. And of course, you've got Christopher Nolan's lucky charm himself, Michael Caine. Michael Caine has appeared in every single Christopher Nolan movie since Batman Begins. Even in Dunkirk he appears, even though they're just using his voice. But as long as Michael Caine is alive, Christopher Nolan will not make a movie where he doesn't put Michael Caine to use. And there are a bunch of other familiar faces like Martin Donovan that'll pop up throughout the movie. But at any rate, the cast is absolutely first rate, and they really help elevate this movie, because even when you don't know what the hell is going on, at least you can enjoy this marvelous cast showing off what they can do. But getting back to just the overall experience of this movie, and it's absolutely an experience. Most of Christopher Nolan's movies are more of just this giant, robust, like spectacle, cinematic experience, however you want to describe it. But he's one of the only filmmakers alive today who's making like $200 million movies that challenge the intellect. And I feel like most movies that cost about $200 million to make are designed to be easily digestible to people of all ages. And I just love the fact that Nolan likes to both challenge himself, he really likes challenging the audience, and he likes challenging his fellow filmmakers and collaborators to always aim higher, because he knows that when it comes to big budget mainstream entertainment, they can always do more. There's no reason to tap the brakes. You can make a movie that's a classic and a hit all at once. They're not mutually exclusive. Look at The Godfather, case in point. But there are not a lot of directors with a track record where they can justify taking these kinds of crazy, big, bold risks, because this movie is so complex, and it's so exhilarating and so fast and packed with so many ideas. And as I was watching it, I was thinking, you know what, this movie probably at one point had a running time problem, and in order to get it down to 2.5 hours, they basically removed the air from every single scene, because it moves so quickly. There's never a moment where like a boss just comes in and says, here is the mission, do you choose to accept it? Or there's never a moment where a villain walks in and says, this is my master plan, this is how I'm going to destroy the world. And typically it's during those moments where the audience can kind of take a breath, exhale, and kind of get caught up and digest and really fully understand. This movie doesn't allow you to exhale once. And if you go to the bathroom, you're totally screwed because you're going to miss everything. But what's cool is that Christopher Nolan assumes that the audience is intelligent enough to keep up, or that they'll be entertained enough that they're going to come back to it and discuss it and debate it. I think there are going to be a lot of college kids who, in a state of ultra consciousness, are going to have a lot of fun pseudo-intellectual debates going over the ins and outs of this, a lot like when The Matrix came out in 1999, but I think this movie is vastly more complicated and vastly more difficult to follow than The Matrix. But in the end, Nolan is trying to give us a thrill ride. He said when he made this movie, he was trying to get back to the thrill that he felt as a kid when he would go see these international spy thrillers in the 1970s. Perfect example would be the James Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, which is probably the best James Bond film that Roger Moore ever appeared in. So I truly do applaud Christopher Nolan trying to create giant entertainment that is also incredibly stimulating to the intellect. And maybe some of my confusion came about from the fact that I was sitting there in the front row at this giant IMAX screen, so the speaker was basically making my ears bleed. I love a good loud movie. I want to be completely enveloped in the sound. I want to be immersed in the image. I want the movie just basically completely overwhelm my senses, so I'm more than happy to have my senses shattered by a movie. However, when somebody's mumbling words and mumbling like the secrets of the story, and you have all these like machine guns going off and music blaring in your face, it can make it difficult to discern what's happening. But I think some people are going to compare Kenneth Branagh's performance in this to Tom Hardy's performance in Dark Knight Rises and come away with the conclusion that Tom Hardy is like the model of clarity and clear speaking in comparison to Kenneth Branagh's character. But as mystified as I was at times, there are other times where I was genuinely exhilarated by some of the big plot reveals. There were two major plot reveals where I just kind of sat back and I was like, bravo, Christopher Nolan, you still got it. And something tells me that on my second go-around, more and more aha moments or moments of clarity are going to emerge for me. But as amazing as Christopher Nolan is as a filmmaker, we have to acknowledge the fact that he is not a one-man band. He's not one guy working in his garage, cranking out his little pet projects. He uses an army to make his movies, and his crew just has to be one of the most game, ambitious, just reliable crews on the planet. His DP, Hoyt van Hoytema, if I'm saying that correctly, he's from Switzerland. He has shot his last three movies, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and now this. And he's rapidly emerging as like someone on the level of like Roger Deakins. I mean, he's one of like the great DPs working today. He also shot Ad Astra, Let the Right One In. I mean, he's absolutely sensational. And it just feels like no matter what Christopher Nolan asks him to do, he's happy to try and deliver the impossible. And there's this little behind-the-scenes featurette on YouTube where he was talking about, as he read the script, he knew that not only did Christopher Nolan expect them to be able to deliver these visuals, that he would expect him to be able to deliver them in camera. Christopher Nolan will use CGI, but he has an aversion to it. If he can capture it in camera, he knows the audience just reacts in a different way. You can just tell when something's been tinkered with or when something's real and authentic and being done practically, because the actors respond in a completely different way if the special effects are being captured then and there. And it just makes the movie so much more gritty and authentic and realistic and just immersive and intense. All those wonderful adjectives. So whether you're talking about flipping cars or flipping actors, or whatever the case might be, I applaud their reliance on practical effects, old school filmmaking. If you can get it in camera, it just delivers a massive impact. I love CGI when it's done well, but how many movies have you seen in the last couple of years where you're like, oh my God, it's just a big giant CG fest. These creatures look terrible. The stunts in this with sailboats and cars and people and guns are just fucking jaw-dropping. And there's this great interview with Robert Pattinson on the featurette where he talks about how Christopher Nolan has this incredibly infectious energy where if it's pouring down rain and it's cold and everybody's miserable, he's excited. He's ready to get out there and shoot. And he basically robs everybody of their ability to ever complain about anything. Everybody's completely energized because they say, all right, well, if this guy is willing to put up with all forms of discomfort and all forms of just pain and misery in order to get the shot, who are we to stand in his way? And I love it anytime you have a filmmaker who leads by example. What you don't want is a filmmaker who sits up there in a helicopter with a bullhorn screaming at you while you're in a swamp up to your nipples covered in leeches. But another major collaborator I should mention on this movie who does an amazing job is Ludwig Göransson. And Ludwig Göransson is rapidly becoming one of my favorite composers in the business and is very quickly racking up an incredible filmography. He did the score for The Mandalorian, which we all know and love. It was absolutely killer. He worked on Creed 2. He worked on Black Panther. And yeah, this is his first Christopher Nolan film, so I hope they'll continue to work together. Hans Zimmer has obviously defined the Christopher Nolan flavor for so many years, but I like the fact that he's branching out, just experimenting with some new musical experiences. His films don't start to feel so interchangeable on that front. And when it comes to critiques of the movie, I'm in a weird position where some of my critiques might not be justified because perhaps I just wasn't fully digesting and appreciating all the details. And I want to put my full faith and trust in Nolan's vision. He very well might have scenes where upon a second, third, fourth viewing, people say, oh my God, like he totally screwed that up. Because of the rules established here, that should not be the case. But I honestly really can't say that. But I guess if I was going to like underline or clarify or articulate one real complaint or grievance, it would be audiences don't mind being bewildered or confused as long as they're excited and curious. And that's a very delicate tightrope to walk because you don't want your audience to feel frustrated. It's like a video game. People love challenges, but they don't want to feel like they're getting screwed. And they just, like, people want to feel like they're putting together a jigsaw puzzle, but if it becomes like you're doing calculus homework, they'll just throw up their hands in despair and walk out. I don't think people are going to throw up their hands in despair in this because there's just so much action and just so much sex appeal and just so much crazy stuff going on. But I think the movie probably could have done a slightly better job of doing a little hand-holding or just one really fun aha moment where somebody just steps out and just explains the plot or at least teases the plot or something. The audience is having to do more work than usual with this movie, and I think some people are going to push back on that. So that's probably my one real note of reservation about the movie. And I'm just frustrated because as a movie goer, it's like an hour and a half to get up to this movie theater to see this movie in IMAX. New York just needs to reopen their theaters, and I don't ever really get political on this channel, but let's just say the local leadership here in New York City and in New York State, they're frustrating me on that front when it comes to film and TV production as well as theatrical exhibition. But that's all I'll say on that subject on this channel. In any event, if you like this reaction and review, please consider checking out my top 10 Christopher Nolan video. I think you will enjoy it. But that's as far as I can go without really going into details and giving things away. So maybe what I'll do is I'll see the movie again and do a live stream and do like a deeper dive. But that is as deep as I'm going to go for now. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. And if you want to talk more or if you want to share some insights with me, hunt me down on Twitter @Colbrax. But thanks again for watching. Greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.